They say the mating bond is sacred. They say your fated mate is the one soul in the universe designed to cherish you. But what happens when your soulmate looks you dead in the eye, laughs, and chooses your own sister instead? I'm going to tell you the story of Seraphina, a girl who was dragged through the mud of the Silver Creek pack, stripped of her rank, and humiliated by the boy she loved. But stick around, because just when she thought her life was over, the most dangerous man in the werewolf kingdom walked through the door. This isn't just a rejection story. It's a reckoning. You are not ready for what Alpha King Henry did to the people who hurt her. The air in the Silver Creek pack house was thick enough to choke on. It was the night of the Blood Moon Ball, the single most critical event in the werewolf calendar. For Seraphina Sera Cross, it was supposed to be the night her life finally began. At 21, she was a late bloomer, still unranked and unmated, living in the shadow of her family's expectations. Or rather, living in the shadow of Bianca. Sera adjusted the hem of her thrifted navy dress, trying to smooth out wrinkles that refused to fade. Across the room, Bianca, her younger sister by 11 months, was glowing. Literally glowing. She wore a custom-made silver gown that cost more than Sera's entire year of wages at the Pack Diner, paid for by their parents, Beta John and Helen. "Stop fidgeting, Sera," her mother hissed, leaning in with a glass of champagne in hand. "You look desperate. Try to blend into the background tonight. We need everyone focused on Bianca. The Alpha sun is shifting tonight." Sera swallowed the lump in her throat. "I know, Mom. I feel something." She did feel something. A low thrumming in her veins, like a bass guitar plucked directly against her heart. It had started the moment she walked into the ballroom. "Just don't embarrass us," her father grumbled, not even looking at her as he adjusted his tie. Sera slipped away, seeking the cool air of the balcony. The Silver Creek pack was mid-sized, wealthy but politically cutthroat. Weakness wasn't tolerated, and Sera, with her dormant wolf and quiet demeanor, was considered the family's genetic dead end. As she stepped onto the terrace, the scent hit her. It was cedarwood, rain, and something spicy, like burnt sage. It was the most intoxicating smell she had ever encountered. Her wolf, usually silent, clawed at her chest, howling a single word. "Mate." The glass doors opened. Caleb Danvers stepped out. Sera's heart stopped. Caleb wasn't just anyone. He was the future Beta, her childhood best friend. The boy who used to bandage her knees when they fell out of trees. He was handsome, in a rugged, golden boy way, with sandy hair and eyes that usually held a spark of mischief. Tonight, they held nothing but ice. "Caleb," Sera breathed, the pull irresistible. She took a step forward. Do you feel that?" Caleb didn't move. He stood stiffly, his hands shoved deep into his tuxedo pockets. He looked at her, then looked past her. "I feel it, Sera. It's the bond," she whispered, a smile breaking across her face, tears pricking her eyes. "We're mates. I knew it. I always hoped it was you." She reached for him, expecting him to pull her into the embrace she had read about in every pack history book. The electric spark that sealed two souls together. Instead, Caleb took a sharp step back. "Don't," he said. His voice wasn't loving, it was annoyed. Sera froze. "Caleb?" "I can't do this, Sera," he said, his voice rising, drawing the attention of a few wolves lingering near the doors. "Look at you. You're nothing. You work in a diner. Your wolf is practically comatose." "I don't understand," Sera stammered, her hands shaking. "We're mates. The moon goddess chose us." "The moon goddess made a mistake," Caleb snapped. By now the commotion had drawn a crowd. The doors swung fully open. Guests poured out, champagne flutes in hand. Among them were Sera's parents and, of course, Bianca. Bianca glided forward, her silver dress shimmering under the moonlight. She didn't look shocked. She looked smug. "What's going on here?" Alpha Miller, the current pack leader and Caleb's father, boomed. Caleb straightened his spine. He looked at the crowd, then at Sera. He raised his voice so everyone, the dignitaries, the warriors, her own family, could hear. "I, Caleb Danvers, future beta of the Silver Creek Pack, reject you, Seraphina Cross, as my mate." The silence was deafening. A physical pain ripped through Sera's chest, a snapping of a tether she had only just discovered. She gasped, clutching her heart, falling to her knees. The rejection agony was real. It felt like her ribs were being cracked open. "I accept," she was supposed to say, to break the bond and end the pain. But she couldn't speak. She looked up at Caleb, pleading with her eyes. "Why?" "I need a strong partner," Caleb said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I need a lunateer female to help me lead the Beta Guard, someone with lineage. Someone like—" He turned. He held out a hand. Bianca stepped forward and placed her manicured hand in his. "Someone like Bianca," Caleb finished. Sera looked at her sister. "Bianca? You knew?" Bianca flipped her hair over her shoulder, smiling down at her sister with a terrifying lack of empathy. "Oh, sweetie, Caleb and I have been seeing each other for 6 months. We were just waiting for him to shift so he could reject you properly. You didn't really think he'd want the runt of the litter, did you?" Sera looked to her parents. Her father was nodding approvingly. Her mother looked relieved. "It's for the best, Seraphina," her mother said, loud enough for the Alpha to hear. "Bianca is much better suited for the role. Don't make a scene." Lying on the cold stone of the balcony, gasping for air while her mate held her sister's hand, Seraphina realized the truth. This wasn't just a rejection. This was an execution of her soul, and nobody cared. 3 months had passed since the rejection, and Seraphina's life had become a living hell. She hadn't left the pack. She couldn't. She had no money, no connections, and as an unranked wolf with a broken bond, she was considered damaged goods in the wider werewolf community. She was trapped in Silver Creek, forced to watch Caleb and Bianca parade their love around town. They were brutal. Bianca, now wearing the beta female's promise ring, made it her personal mission to ensure Sera knew her place. Sera was demoted from the diner's front of house to the scullery, scrubbing grease traps, while Caleb and Bianca would come in for lunch, laughing loudly, making sure to kiss whenever Sera walked by with a bus tub. The rejection pain had faded to a dull, constant ache, a gray fog that coated her world. She had stopped shifting. She had stopped trying. Then came the announcement that changed everything. The king was coming. Alpha King Henry Blackwood. The rumor mill went into overdrive. Henry was a legend and a nightmare. He ruled the entire continent with an iron fist. They said he was 7 feet tall, scarred, and had killed the rogue king of the north with his bare hands. He was 30 years old, unmated, and notoriously intolerant of incompetence. He was coming to inspect Silver Creek's finances. Apparently, Alpha Miller had been cooking the books. "Everyone needs to be perfect," Bianca screeched the morning of the king's arrival. She was barking orders at the Omega staff in the packhouse kitchen, despite not actually being in charge yet. "Sera! You're serving the head table." Sera looked up from the sink, her hands raw from bleach. "What?" "No. Mom said I'm to stay out of sight." "Mom isn't here," Bianca sneered. "One of the servers called in sick. You're taking her place. And try to wear something that covers all of that." She gestured vaguely at Sera's faded uniform and tired face. "We don't want the king to think we employ zombies." Bianca wanted her there to humiliate her. It was a power play. If Sera spilled a drink or stuttered in front of the king, it would give Caleb another reason to mock her. "Fine," Sera whispered. That evening, the pack hall was transformed. Gold. Banners hung from the rafters. The air smelled of roasting venison and fear. When the doors opened, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Henry Blackwood entered. He didn't walk. He stalked. He was terrifyingly beautiful. Pitch-black hair, sharp cheekbones that could cut glass, and eyes the color of molten gold. He wore a black tactical suit rather than a tuxedo, radiating a power so immense that lower-ranked wolves instinctively bared their necks as he passed. He was followed by his gamma, a hulking man named Silas. Sera kept her head down, clutching a tray of wine glasses. She moved like a ghost, weaving between tables, trying to make herself invisible. She reached the head table. Alpha Miller was sweating profusely. Caleb sat to his right, with Bianca clinging to his arm like a decorative vine. "Your Majesty," Alpha Miller stammered, "we are honored." "Cut the crap, Miller." Henry's voice was a low rumble that vibrated in Sera's chest. It was dark, commanding, and utterly bored. "I've seen your ledger. You're bleeding money. Explain to me why your defense budget is down 40%, but your personal expenses are up 200%. The table went deadly silent. Sera's hands shook. She moved to refill the king's water glass. "And who is this?" Henry asked, not looking at Miller, but staring at his empty glass. Bianca chimed in, desperate for attention. "Oh, that's just my sister, Your Majesty. She's a bit slow. The runt of the family. Don't mind her." Caleb snickered. "Yeah, we try to find uses for everyone here, even the broken ones." Sera froze. The humiliation burned her cheeks. She felt the tears welling up. "Just pour the water," she told herself. "Just pour the water and leave." She tilted the pitcher. "Is that so?" Henry turned his head slowly. For the first time, his golden eyes locked onto Sera's. The pitcher slipped from her hand. It shattered on the table, sending ice water cascading onto Henry's lap and splashing onto Bianca's silk dress. "You idiot!" Bianca shrieked, jumping up. "Look what you did! You ruined my dress!" Caleb slammed his hand on the table. "God, you are useless, Sera! Get out of here before I have the guards throw you out." Alpha Miller looked ready to faint. "Your Majesty, I am so sorry. She is—" "Quiet," Henry said. The single word silenced the room instantly. Henry didn't look at the water on his lap. He didn't look at the screaming Bianca or the furious Caleb. He stood up slowly, towering over everyone. He took a step towards Sera, who was trembling so hard her teeth chattered. She prepared herself for the blow. She prepared to be executed for assaulting the king. Henry leaned in. He inhaled deeply, his nostrils flaring. He closed the distance between them, trapping her against the edge of the table. He reached out a hand, his rough fingers brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. The touch sent a shockwave through her body that made the previous bond with Caleb feel like a static shock from a doorknob. "You," Henry growled, his voice changing. It wasn't human anymore. It was the Alpha of Alphas speaking. He turned to the room, his eyes blazing with a violence that promised bloodshed. He looked at Caleb, then at Bianca. "You rejected her?" Henry asked Caleb, his voice deceptively calm. Caleb blinked, confused by the shift in atmosphere. Yes, Your Majesty. She's weak. She has no wolf." "No wolf?" Henry laughed, a dark, terrifying sound. "You fool." He turned back to Sera, his gaze softening into something possessive, something ancient. He grabbed her hand, the same hand Caleb had refused to hold, and pulled her flush against his chest. "She doesn't have a weak wolf," Henry announced to the silent hall. "She has a royal wolf, her scent. It's White Lotus and Rain." Henry looked down at Sera, his eyes burning with intensity. "Mine," he growled. Then he looked at the terrified pack. "You have been mistreating my mate." The silence that followed Henry's declaration wasn't empty. It was heavy, pressing down on the room like a physical weight. "Mine." The word echoed off the high vaulted ceilings of the pack hall, bouncing between the horrified faces of the Silver Creek elite. Sera felt the vibration of the growl in Henry's chest against her cheek. She was paralyzed. Her brain couldn't process the input. The Alpha King, the most lethal predator on the continent, was holding her as if she were made of spun glass. "Your mate?" Caleb broke the silence first. His voice cracked, stripping away his veneer of beta authority. He looked at Sera, then at Henry, his face twisting into a mask of incredulous laughter. "Your Majesty, with all due respect, there must be a mistake. You can't mate with her. She's defective. She's been tested by the pack doctors. Her wolf is dormant. She's practically human." Henry didn't release Sera. If anything, his grip tightened, his arm forming an iron band around her waist. He didn't shout. He didn't rage. He simply turned his head slowly to look at Caleb. The temperature in the room plummeted. Frost began to creep across the spilled water on the table. "You speak of defects," Henry said softly, his voice sliding through the room like oil. "Yet you were the one who failed to recognize the rarest wolf spirit in existence, because you were too blinded by cheap glitter." He cast a disdainful glance at Bianca's silver dress. Bianca flushed a deep crimson, her hands balled into fists at her sides. She stepped forward, her entitlement overriding her survival instinct. "Your Majesty, I don't know what game this is, but Seraphina is a liar. She probably used a witch's hex to mimic a scent. She's jealous because Caleb chose me. I am the future beta female. I am Neil." The command didn't come from Henry's throat. It seemed to come from the earth itself. It was the Alpha voice, but amplified by royal blood. The effect was instantaneous and violent. Every wolf in the room dropped. Alpha Miller's knees hit the floor with a sickening crack. Caleb collapsed forward, gasping as the pressure forced his forehead against the floorboards. Bianca let out a strangled cry as she was forced down, her expensive dress tearing at the seams, her face pressed into the cold, wet puddle of water and spilled wine. The only person standing was Seraphina. She looked around wildly, panic fluttering in her chest. What? What are you doing to them? I am showing them their place, Henry murmured, turning his attention entirely to her. He ignored the whimpers of the 300 guests flattened by his aura. He lifted his hand, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. His skin was rough, calloused from war, but his touch was agonizingly gentle. You are not standing because I am allowing it, Seraphina. You are standing because my command does not work on you. An alpha cannot command his queen. We are equals. Sera stared at him, her breath hitching. Queen, I scrub dishes. I sleep in the attic. Not anymore, Henry whispered. He looked down at her hands. They were red, chapped, and raw from harsh detergents. He saw the chemical burns near her cuticles. A muscle in his jaw ticked, a rhythmic pulse of suppressed rage. Silas, Henry said, not looking away from Sera's damaged hands. From the shadows, the massive gamma rose. He was sweating, fighting the pressure of his king's aura, but he was strong enough to stand. Yes, Alpha, Silas rumbled. Clear the room, Henry ordered. Revoke Alpha Miller's title effective immediately. Place him, his wife, his son, and that female. He gestured vaguely at Bianca, who was sobbing into the floor. Under house arrest. No one leaves Silver Creek until I have finished my investigation. Investigation into the finances? Silas asked. Henry finally looked up, his golden eyes burning with a cold blue fire. No. An investigation into treason. Abuse of a royal mate is a capital offense. A collective gasp went through the room from those who could still breathe. Treason. The punishment was death. Sera grabbed Henry's lapel. The fabric of his tactical suit was thick, high-quality Kevlar weave. You can't. That's my family. Henry looked down at her, and the fire in his eyes died down, replaced by a pool of infinite sadness. Family protects you, Seraphina. These people, they broke you. And I will burn the world down to fix what they did. He swept her up into his arms, bridal style. Sera let out a small squeak, instinctively wrapping her arms around his neck. He was so tall, so solid. For the first time in her life, she felt small, in a way that wasn't diminishing. She felt safe. Henry stepped over Caleb's prone body, without even looking down. He walked out of the banquet hall, carrying the scullery maid past the bowed heads of the people who had tormented her for years, leaving nothing behind him but silence and the scent of rain. The elevator ride to the penthouse suite was silent. Henry held her the entire way, refusing to put her down, even when Sera insisted she could walk. You have no shoes, he noted simply. Sera looked down. Somewhere in the chaos of the banquet hall she had lost her worn-out flats. Her stockings were torn at the toe. She curled her feet in embarrassment, trying to hide them against his dark suit. When the doors opened, Sera gasped. The penthouse of the Silver Creek Packhouse was usually reserved for visiting dignitaries, but she had never been allowed inside to clean it. It was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the forest, a roaring fireplace, and furniture that looked like it cost more than the diner she worked at. Henry carried her to a plush velvet sofa and set her down gently. He didn't sit next to her. Instead, he knelt on the floor at her feet, the king of all wolves, kneeling before the family reject. Let me see your hands, he said softly. Sera hid them behind her back. They're ugly. They smell like bleach. Henry didn't force her. He just waited, his palm open, his golden eyes patient. Nothing about you is ugly to me, Seraphina. Please. Trembling, she slowly brought her hands forward. Henry took them in his large, warm ones. He turned them over, inspecting the red, irritated skin, the small cuts, the cracked knuckles. He didn't look disgusted. He looked devastated. "I felt your pain," he said, his voice rough. "For months. A dull ache in my chest. I thought it was just stress from the border wars. But it was you. You were hurting, and I wasn't here." He brought her hands to his lips, kissing the raw knuckles one by one. The sensation sent a jolt of electricity through Sera so potent she almost jumped off the couch. It wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. A warm golden light seemed to seep from his lips into her skin, soothing the ache in her bones. "Why me?" Sera whispered, the question that had been haunting her finally spilling out. "Henry, look at me. I'm nobody." Caleb was right. My wolf never manifested. I'm weak. If you claim me, the other alphas will laugh at you. Henry stopped kissing her hands. He looked up, his expression hardening. "Do you know why a white lotus wolf is a myth, Seraphina?" She shook her head. I didn't know I was one. They are the direct descendants of the moon goddess's first guard, Henry explained, his voice taking on a storytelling cadence. They are not designed for petty pack squabbles. They are not designed to submit to betas or standard alphas. If a white wolf is born into a regular pack, and she is surrounded by mediocrity, her spirit goes into hibernation. It protects itself. He squeezed her hands. Your wolf didn't reject you, Sera. She rejected them. She refused to come out for Caleb Danvers because he was beneath her. She was waiting for a calm that matched her storm. She was waiting for a king. Sera felt a tear roll down her cheek. So, I'm not broken? You are the most powerful creature in this territory, Henry said firmly. And once we heal you, once you shift, you will bring this entire pack to its knees without uttering a word. A knock came at the door. Henry's demeanor shifted instantly. The tenderness evaporated, replaced by the mask of the Alpha King. He stood up, towering over the room again. "Enter," he commanded. Silas walked in. He looked grim. He was holding a thick manila folder and a black medical tablet. "We raided the Pack Hospital archives, Alpha," Silas said, refusing to look at Sera out of respect, keeping his eyes on Henry. "We found Seraphina's birth records and her medical history." "And?" Henry crossed his arms. "It wasn't just neglect," Silas said, his voice tight with anger. Beta John and Helen, her parents, they knew. Sera sat up straighter. "Knew what?" Silas glanced at her, then back to the king. "When you were 5, you had a blood test. The markers for a royal wolf were off the charts. High energy potential. Your parents requested a suppressive agent." The room spun. Sera grabbed the arm of the sofa. "Suppressive drugs? They've been dosing your food with wolfsbane microdoses for 15 years, Silas revealed. "That's why you couldn't shift. That's why you felt weak. They were poisoning you." "Why?" Sera's voice broke. "Why would my own parents do that?" "Because of Bianca," Henry answered. His voice was terrifyingly calm. A predator assessing the kill. He walked over and took the file from Silas, flipping it open. "Because if the pack knew what you were, Bianca would have been the shadow. You would have been the star. They poisoned their own child to ensure their favorite daughter could shine." Henry threw the file onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy thud, sliding open to reveal charts and graphs documenting the systematic dampening of Sera's powers. Sera stared at the papers. The betrayal wasn't just Caleb rejecting her. It was her entire life. Her mother's scolding, her father's indifference, Bianca's cruelty. It was all manufactured. They had clipped her wings and then mocked her for not being able to fly. A cold numbness spread through her chest. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was something darker. Something that felt like the wolf Henry said was sleeping inside her. "What do you want to do, Seraphina?" Henry asked quietly. Sera looked up at him. The tears were gone. Her eyes, usually a soft brown, flashed with a momentary silver light. "I want to see them," she said. Henry raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure? I can have them executed without you ever seeing their faces again." "No." Sera stood up. Her legs were shaky, but she locked her knees. She looked at her raw hands, then at the file, and finally at the king who was offering her the world. "They spent my whole life telling me I was nothing. I want them to see what I am when I'm with you. I want to look them in the eye when you sentence them." Henry smiled. It was a dark, dangerous smile, sharp as a blade. He walked over and offered her his arm. "Then let us go, my queen. The dungeon awaits." The Silver Creek dungeons were not built for comfort. They were carved directly into the limestone bedrock beneath the pack house, a damp, suffocating maze that smelled of rust, mildew, and ancient fear. Sera shivered as the elevator dinged, opening into the dimly lit corridor. The temperature here was freezing. Without a word, Henry unbuttoned his suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders. It was heavy, warm, and smelled of him, sandalwood and absolute power. It acted as a shield against the cold and the horrors waiting ahead. "They are in holding cell 4, Silas rumbled, walking ahead of them. "We kept them together. It usually makes them turn on each other faster." Henry's hand rested on the small of Sera's back, guiding her forward. "Remember, Seraphina, you are the one in control here. They are behind the bars. You are free." They reached the end of the hall. Silas swiped a key card, and the heavy iron door groaned open. Inside the cell, the royal family of Silver Creek looked like ruins of their former selves. Alpha Miller, now just Miller, sat on the single concrete bench, his head in his hands. Her mother, Helen, was pacing the small space, her makeup smeared, her designer dress ruined by the filth of the floor. Bianca was curled in the corner, hugging her knees, while Caleb stood by the bars, gripping them until his knuckles were white. When Sera stepped into the light, the reaction was immediate. "Sera!" Helen gasped, rushing to the bars. Her eyes were wide, desperate. "Oh, thank the goddess! Sera! Baby, tell him! Tell him this is a misunderstanding! We're your family!" Sera stood 3 feet from the bars, staring at the woman who had birthed her. For years, she had craved this attention. She had wanted her mother to look at her with anything other than disdain. Now, looking at Helen's frantic, pleading face, Sera felt nothing but a cold, hollow ache. "Family?" Sera asked, her voice quiet but echoing off the stone walls. "Silas showed me the medical files, Mother. The wolfsbane." Helen froze. The color drained from her face, leaving her gray and aged. Miller looked up from the bench, his eyes defeated. We had to." "Had to?" Henry's voice was a low growl that made the metal bars vibrate. He stepped out from the shadows behind Sera and the air in the cell grew heavy with his killing intent. "You poisoned a child. You poisoned my mate." Caleb, who had been staring at Sera with a mix of horror and confusion, finally spoke. "Wolfsbane? Mom? Dad? Is that true? Is that why she never shifted?" "Shut up, Caleb!" Bianca snapped from the corner. She scrambled to her feet, her eyes wild with jealousy. Even in a dungeon, she couldn't stand not being the center of attention. "Who cares? Look at her. She's still a nobody. Just because the king feels sorry for her doesn't mean she's special. She's a servant." Sera turned her gaze to her sister. "I scrubbed your floors, Bianca. I washed your clothes. I took the blame when you snuck out to meet boys, and all the while you knew I was being drugged." "I didn't know about the drugs," Bianca shrieked, though her eyes darted away, betraying her lie. "But even if I did, it wouldn't matter. You were born to serve me. That's the natural order. I am the Luna." Henry took a step forward, his hand raising. "No," Sera said, placing a hand on Henry's chest. "Wait." She stepped closer to the bars, until she was face to face with her father. "Why?" she asked. "I understand Bianca hates me. But you? You're my father." Miller looked at her, his eyes wet. But it wasn't a look of love. It was fear. "It wasn't just to let Bianca shine, Seraphina," he whispered, his voice trembling. "It was fear. When you were born, the oracle saw you." Sera frowned. "The oracle? She said you were a white lotus." Miller confessed, the words tumbling out. "But she said a white lotus brings change. It brings war. We wanted a quiet life. We wanted power, yes, but we wanted stability. Your existence threatened the status quo. If the High Council found out we harbored a white wolf, they would have come for us. They would have taken you. So we put you to sleep to keep us safe." Sera felt like she had been punched. "You didn't protect me to save me. You suppressed me to save yourselves." "We gave you a roof over your head," Helen cried out, gripping the bars. "We let you live. We could have left you in the woods." Something inside Sera snapped. It wasn't a mental snap. It was physical. A burning heat exploded in her stomach, right where the wolfsbane had sat for years. It felt like lava rushing through her veins, scorching the poison out of her system. She gasped, clutching her chest, doubling over. "Sera?" Henry was there instantly, catching her before she hit the floor. "What is it? Is it the bond?" "It burns," Sera screamed, her voice distorting. Her bones began to crack. The suppression was breaking. The truth had shattered the mental dam, and now 15 years of repressed power was fighting its way out. "Get back!" Henry roared at the family in the cell, though they were already cowering against the back wall. Henry pulled Sera into his lap, not caring about the dirt on the floor. "Breathe, Seraphina. Let it happen. Don't fight it." "It hurts," she sobbed. Black liquid, the residue of the poison, began to leak from her pores, staining her skin. Her eyes rolled back, glowing with a blinding white light that illuminated the dark dungeon like a flare. "I know it hurts," Henry whispered, pressing his forehead against hers, sharing his strength, pouring his alpha aura into her to stabilize her heart. "But you have to burn the poison to be free. I have you. I'm not letting go." The transformation of a werewolf is usually brutal, bones breaking, muscles rearranging. But for a white lotus wolf breaking a 15-year seal, It was catastrophic. The air in the dungeon began to crackle with static electricity. Light bulbs in the hallway shattered, raining glass down on Silas, who stood guard, shielding his face. "Alpha!" Silas shouted over the roar of wind that seemed to be coming from nowhere. "Her energy readings, they're off the charts. She's going to bring the ceiling down." "Hold the perimeter," Henry ordered, refusing to move. He held Sera tight as her body convulsed. Sera screamed one last time, a sound that wasn't human. It was the cry of something ancient, something that had been chained in the dark and was finally seeing the sun. Then, with a sound like a thunderclap, her human form dissolved into pure light. The light blinded everyone. When it faded, Sera was gone. Standing in her place, panting heavily, was a wolf. But not just a wolf. She was massive, easily the size of Henry's wolf, dwarfing the average male. Her fur was not just white, it was iridescent, shimmering like pearl under the flickering emergency lights. Her eyes were pools of liquid silver. She shook her massive head, sending droplets of the black toxin flying onto the walls. She planted her paws on the ground and let out a growl that shook the dust from the stone ceiling. Inside the cell, the reaction was absolute terror. Caleb fell to his knees. The instinct to submit was so overwhelming that he couldn't control his own limbs. His wolf, the one that had rejected her, was now whimpering in his head, clawing to get out and bow. "By the goddess," Miller whispered, staring at the creature he had tried to kill. "She's beautiful." Bianca was pressed flat against the wall, her mouth open in a silent scream. She finally understood the magnitude of her mistake. She hadn't bullied a runt. She had bullied a deity. The white wolf turned her massive head toward the cell. She didn't attack. She simply looked at them. Her silver eyes held a profound, terrifying intelligence. She looked at her parents, then at Caleb, then at Bianca. She sneezed. It was a dismissive, arrogant sound. She turned her back on them. She looked at Henry. The king was still kneeling on the floor, covered in dust and the black residue of her purge. He looked up at her, awe written all over his hard face. "Hello, my queen," he whispered. Sera, the wolf, stepped forward and licked the blood from his cheek. Then the adrenaline faded. Her massive legs wobbled. The purge had taken everything she had. She collapsed. Henry caught her giant head in his hands before she hit the ground. "Rest now. You've done it." When Sera woke up, she was back in the penthouse. She was in the massive bed, buried under silk sheets. She felt different, lighter. The constant brain fog that had plagued her for years was gone. Her senses were dialed up to 11. She could hear a heartbeat in the next room. She could smell the pine needles in the forest 5 miles away. She sat up. Henry was sitting in a chair by the bed, reading a document. He looked tired, but when she moved, his head snapped up. "You're awake," he said, the relief evident in his voice. He stood and poured her a glass of water. Did I hurt anyone?" Sera asked, her voice raspy. "Only their egos," Henry smiled grimly. "And the dungeon plumbing, we'll have to repair the pipes." He sat on the edge of the bed and handed her the water. "You were a wolf for 3 hours, Sera. The doctors checked you. The poison is gone. Every drop." Sera drank the water greedily. "What happens to them? My family?" Henry's face hardened. "Their trial is set for tomorrow. But that is not our biggest problem right now." Sera froze. "What is?" Henry picked up the document he had been reading. It was a map of the territory. When you shifted, Henry said seriously, the energy surge was massive. It was like a beacon. A white lotus wolf hasn't been born in 400 years. Your energy signature just announced to the entire supernatural world that you exist. He pointed to the northern border on the map. My scouts report movement. The rogue factions are mobilizing. And not just rogues. The Vampire Council has requested an emergency summit. And the High Council of Elders is demanding I hand you over for safekeeping. Sera felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. Safekeeping? That sounds like a prison. Exactly, Henry growled. They fear you. A white wolf has the power to unite packs or destroy them. They don't want you to be my queen. They want you to be a weapon in their armory. He took her hand, interlacing their fingers. They are coming for you, Seraphina. All of them. The reject of Silver Creek is now the most wanted woman in the world. Sera looked at their joined hands. Yesterday she was a waitress afraid of spilling wine. Today she was the cause of a potential war. She squeezed Henry's hand back, feeling the strength of the bond flow between them. She wasn't that scared little girl anymore. The wolf inside her, the white lotus, stirred, uncoiling in her chest like a dragon. Let them come, Sera said, surprised by the steel in her own voice. I didn't survive my family just to be locked up by a council. Henry grinned. It was the smile of a king who finally had a partner worthy of the throne. That, he said, kissing her knuckles, is exactly what I wanted to hear. But their moment of peace was interrupted by the penthouse door bursting open. It wasn't Silas. It was a messenger, bloodied and breathless. King Henry, the messenger gasped, falling to his knees. The northern border. It's been breached. Henry stood up, pulling Sera with him. By who? Rogues? The messenger shook his head, his eyes wide with terror. No, sire. It's him. The one everyone thought you killed. Henry went still. Vance? Yes, the messenger choked out. The rogue king is alive, and he says he's here to claim his fated mate. Henry turned to Sera, his face pale. He says his mate is the white wolf. The atmosphere in the penthouse shifted from domestic intimacy to war room tension in the span of a single heartbeat. The name Vance, the Rogue King, hung in the air like a poisonous vapor. Henry moved with a speed that blurred the edges of Sera's vision. He was at the window, staring toward the northern mountains, his body radiating a lethal, cold fury. He's dead. I ripped his throat out myself 3 years ago. This is a trick. Dead men don't march armies, sire, the messenger stammered, still kneeling on the plush carpet. He has the prockle scars. He has the scent of rot and old blood. And he is demanding the white wolf. Sera stepped forward, the silk sheet pooling around her waist. The fear she expected to feel, the old fear of the waitress who broke a glass, was gone. In its place was a cold, crystalline clarity. The white wolf inside her didn't tremble at the mention of war. She bristled with anticipation. Let him come, Sera said. Her voice was calm, but it carried a weight that made the messenger flinch. Henry turned to her, his expression torn between the protective instinct of a mate and the respect of a king. Sera, Vance is a monster. He doesn't want a mate. He wants a battery. He wants to drain your power to fuel his immortality. I'm moving you to the safe house in the Southern Isles immediately. No, Sera said. She stood up, walking across the room to stand before him. She placed her hand over his heart, feeling the frantic, powerful rhythm beneath the muscle. "You said I am your queen. You said I am the most powerful creature in this territory. Queens do not run. Sera, if I run, I prove them right," she interrupted softly. "I prove Caleb right. I prove my parents right. I prove that I am weak. We have a trial today, Henry. I will not let a ghost from your past stop me from burying the ghosts of mine." Henry stared at her for a long moment, his golden eyes searching hers. He saw the steel in her spine, the silver flecks swirling in her irises. He let out a ragged breath and nodded. "Silas!" Henry barked. The Gamma appeared in the doorway instantly. "Alpha? Double the guard on the northern perimeter. Tell the archers to shoot anything that moves. And prepare the town square. The queen is ready to pass judgment." Nupi. Boink. The town square of Silver Creek was packed. Word of the White Wolf had spread faster than fire in a drought. Every member of the pack, from the oldest elder to the youngest pup, was pressed against the barricades. They weren't just there for the gossip anymore. They were there to see the deity that had been scrubbing their floors for years. In the center of the square, a raised wooden platform had been erected. On it, 4 figures knelt in chains: Miller, Helen, Caleb, Bianca. They looked haggard. The night in the dungeon had stripped away their arrogance, leaving them shivering in the cool morning wind. Bianca was weeping silently, her makeup gone, her silver dress stained with mud. Caleb stared at the ground, unable to lift his head. A hush fell over the crowd as the heavy oak doors of the pack house opened. Henry emerged first, wearing his ceremonial black cloak with the fur collar, a heavy gold chain resting on his shoulders. He looked every inch the Alpha King, terrifying, regal, and dangerous. But all eyes were on the woman walking beside him. Sera wore a gown of deep, midnight blue velvet that contrasted sharply with her pale skin. Her hair was loose, cascading down her back like a dark river. She wore no jewelry, no crown. She didn't need it. Her skin seemed to hum with a faint, pearlescent glow. She walked with her head high, her steps silent and graceful. She ascended the platform and stood looking down at the people who had defined her existence. "Raise your heads," she commanded. It wasn't a shout. It was a simple instruction, but the alpha power woven into her voice forced their chins up. Helen looked at her daughter and let out a sob. "Sera, please, we're your parents." "You were my wardens," Sera corrected, her voice devoid of emotion. "You were the jailers who poisoned my food and clipped my wings." She turned to the crowd. "These 4 people conspired against the crown." Sera, quote, Sera Kuratan, quote, her voice carrying to the back of the square, "not by plotting an assassination, but by suppressing a royal wolf. They weakened this pack to protect their own comfort. They chose mediocrity over greatness." A low murmur of anger rippled through the crowd. Wolves valued strength above all else. To knowingly suppress a powerhouse like a white wolf was a sin against the species. Sera turned back to the prisoners. She walked over to Caleb. The boy who had rejected her looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "I didn't know about the poison, Sera. I swear, I wanted what was best for the pack." "No, Caleb," Sera said softly, leaning down. "You wanted what was easiest. You wanted a trophy, not a mate. You rejected me because I didn't fit the picture in your head." She placed a finger under his chin. "You wanted a strong wolf. Now you are facing one." "I regret it," Caleb whispered, tears leaking from his eyes. I feel the bond, Sera. It's tearing me apart. Please, take me back. The crowd gasped. A rejected mate begging to be taken back was unheard of. Sera smiled, but it was a sad, final thing. The bond is dead, Caleb. You killed it on that balcony. My wolf doesn't know you anymore. She straightened up and looked at Henry. I have made my decision. Henry nodded. Speak it, and it shall be law. Sera pointed to Miller and Helen. For the crime of poisoning a child and treason against the nature of our kind, I sentence you to exile. You are stripped of the name Silver Creek. You will leave these lands by sunset. If you are found within the borders after dark, the patrols will treat you as rogues. Helen screamed, collapsing against her husband. Exile was a death sentence for wolves their age. They would be huntless, packless wanderers. Sera turned to Caleb. Caleb Danvers, you wanted to lead? You wanted to be beta? She shook her head. You lack the judgment to lead. You are stripped of your rank. You will remain in the pack, but you will serve in the Omega Corps. You will clean the floors I cleaned. You will wash the dishes I washed. You will learn what it means to serve from the bottom up. Caleb slumped, burying his face in his hands. It was a humiliation worse than death for a high-born male. Finally, Sera turned to Bianca. Bianca was trembling violently. She looked up at Sera with a mixture of terror and lingering hatred. Just kill me, she hissed. Get it over with. I won't bow to you. Sera looked at her sister. She remembered the taunts, the ruined clothes, the years of psychological torture. Death is too quick for you, Bianca, Sera said coldly. And you crave attention too much for me to make you a martyr. Sera leaned in close, her silver eyes flaring. I sentence you to silence. She placed her thumb on Bianca's forehead. A spark of white energy jumped from her skin to her sister's. I bind your voice, Sera whispered. You will not speak, you will not command, and you will not scream. You will live among us as a ghost. You will watch me lead this pack. You will watch me be the queen you thought you deserved, and you will not be able to utter a single word of complaint. Bianca's eyes bulged. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. She clawed at her throat, panic setting in. She was mute. Take them away, Henry ordered. The guards dragged the sobbing, silent family off the stage. The crowd erupted into cheers, chanting Sera's name. Queen Seraphina, the White Wolf! Sera didn't smile. She felt a heavy exhaustion settle over her, the emotional toll of severing her past, finally hitting her. She swayed. Henry was there instantly, his arm around her waist. You did well, he murmured into her hair. You were merciful, but brutal, a true queen. It's done, Sera whispered, leaning into his warmth. The past is dead. Yes, Henry said, his body tensing as he looked toward the northern horizon. But the future is here. A deep, reverberating horn blast cut through the cheers of the crowd. The sound came from the north. The cheers died instantly. The air grew static. On the distant ridge overlooking the valley, a line of black shapes appeared. Hundreds of them. Rogues. They stood silhouetted against the gray sky, a ragged army of the forgotten and the violent. And in front of them, riding a massive, scarred grizzly bear, an abomination of nature, sat a man. Even from this distance, his aura felt like rotting meat. Vance, the Rogue King. He raised a hand, and a bolt of dark purple energy shot into the sky, exploding like a flare. It formed a symbol in the smoke, a broken crown. Henry stepped in front of Sera, a low growl building in his chest that shook the wooden platform. His claws extended, lengthening into black daggers. "He's challenging us," Henry snarled. "He wants a war for the throne." Sera stepped out from behind Henry. She didn't hide. She reached down and tore the velvet skirt of her gown, ripping it up to her thighs to free her legs. She kicked off her heels. Her eyes began to glow, the silver light intensifying until it was hard to look at her. The white wolf was surfacing, not to hide, but to fight. She reached out and took Henry's hand. Her light mixed with his darkness, swirling together in a terrifying, beautiful vortex of power. "He wants the throne?" Sera asked, her voice echoing with the dual tones of woman and wolf. She looked at Henry, and for the first time since the rejection, she smiled. A feral, dangerous smile. "Then let's show him why this throne belongs to us." As the rogue army began its charge down the mountain, thundering toward Silver Creek, Seraphina and Henry didn't flinch. They stood hand in hand, the Alpha King and the White Wolf Queen, ready to burn the world down to protect what was theirs. The rejection was over. The reign had begun. And that is the story of Seraphina Cross. She started as the girl scrubbing floors, rejected by a boy who couldn't see her worth, and betrayed by the family who was supposed to protect her. But fate has a funny way of balancing the scales. She didn't just find a better mate. She found her power, her voice, and a love that was willing to burn down kingdoms for her. Henry and Sera's story doesn't end here. The war with the Rogue King is a tale for another time, but one thing is certain. Seraphina is no longer the victim. She is the storm that the world never saw coming. Wow, that ending gave me chills. What do you think? Was Sera's punishment for her family too harsh? Or did they get exactly what they deserved? I want to hear your verdict in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear part 2 where Sera and Henry take on the Rogue King, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a chapter of these werewolf romances. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.